Okay, welcome to another Hasidus class, Jewish mysticism here at Ascent, which is the center of Jewish mysticism here in Sfat. So today I learned a very beautiful talk of the Rebbe. The Rebbe speaks about the concept of Shavuos. It says everybody agrees on Shavuos that we have to eat and drink. Now we know that Shavuos is the one day that if any day you would think that it shouldn't be connected to eating and drinking. Shavuos is the day that's connected to God giving the Torah. It wasn't exactly a party. It was a very meaningful moment. The Torah is about what to do in life. But the truth is that eating and drinking is very appropriate. Why? Because the idea of the Torah is not to take us out of this world, but to bring God into this world. And this is something that I just studied from the Baal Shem Tov. He says everything in the world can be elevated. Everything can be connected to God. And it boils down to a very, very simple idea, which is very important. And that is the concept of intention. In other words, most religions or most people, the way the brain thinks is things are kind of black and white. It's either good or it's bad. So you obviously are trying to go towards the good and going away from the bad. But that is a very simplistic understanding of reality because, for example, a piece of paper, is it good or is it bad? Well, actually, it's neither good nor it's bad. It depends what you're going to do with it. Right? We all know the famous story that once there was a young man and wanted to challenge the wisest man on earth. So he comes, he had a little butterfly in his palm of his hand. He had his two hands cupped together. So he goes to the wise man and he says to him, tell me the butterfly in my hand, is it alive or is it dead? So the wise man said, listen, he understood that if he would say it's alive, he would like squash it. And if he would say it's dead, if you say it's alive, he would squash it. If he would say it's dead, he'd let it go. So he was going to prove him wrong. So he said, my son, the answer is in your own hands. In other words, so if something's going to be good or bad, in a way, it really doesn't depend on what that thing is. The answer is in your own hands. Is this thing going to be holy or is it going to be unholy? Is this going to be something that's used for good or used for bad? This thing very much depends on you. That's what's going to determine if this thing is going to be a good thing or not a good thing. So, the same thing is with food. Everything in this world, it basically boils down to what it is that we are going to choose to do with this thing, including our own body. Because the body also, as Alter Rebbe says, is klipas noiga. The body is kind of like any body, really. It's made of the earth. It can be used for good things or bad things. And so the choices that we make of what we use something for is really the determining factor. And that's really what the whole book of the Tanya tells us. Tanya is teaching us that there are basically 3 layers to reality. The Baal Shem Tov actually says 5 because there are in between layers, but basically there are 3 layers to reality. The top layer of reality is Kedusha, holiness. And holiness is anything that's done in the service of God. And then there's the middle layer, which is basically how most things are, which is anything that's done in your own service. In other words, it's not a negative thing, but it's not a positive thing either. Right? The idea that because we exist, we're special would mean that cockroaches are special. There are more cockroaches than human beings on this planet. And they exist. So, I don't know if you saw that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But there was a place, there were millions of people there, and suddenly all these cockroaches came from the ground. It was disgusting. But the point is that cockroaches, lots and lots of cockroaches. So cockroaches also exist. And if a person thinks, oh, well, but I have a big ego, I'll let you know a secret. They have a big ego too, because the very fact that something exists and wants to feed itself and wants to eat and sleep and procreate is because they have an ego. And because they have an ego, they want to perpetuate themselves. They want to feel pleasure. They don't want to feel pain. So even a little bacteria on some level has an ego. Everything has an ego. So the fact that you have an ego doesn't mean that they don't have an ego. You just may not look at them. You may not respect them. You may not think that they have an ego, but they do have an ego. And so as such, the very fact that you exist, existence itself is not enough to say, oh, wow, that's amazing. Because there are a lot of other existence in this world which aren't so amazing. So if you just go based on the fact that you exist, that's not such the most amazing accomplishment that's been created. Because there are many, many others. There are spiders, there are mosquitoes, and they all exist and they all have little egos. So there's a deeper story here. And the deeper story is that we can choose to make our existence meaningful, which is really something that no animal can choose. Nobody can choose to make their lives meaningful except for a Jew or a Gentile, because we have the capacity, because we have both a godly soul and an animal soul. We have the capacity to dedicate ourselves basically to something higher. And when we dedicate ourselves to something higher, we're dedicating ourselves to something better, and we're elevating everything. And so now we understand how the whole world is really, if you want to call it God's gefilte fish, I don't want to say God's oyster, but it's God's gefilte fish. Why? Because everything in the world can be elevated. And that's why there was a great rabbi by the name of Yosef. Right? So Rabbi Yosef, he would shecht. Now today it's not so difficult to have meat. People have meat. But in the olden days to have meat wasn't a simple story. You didn't really have refrigeration. So to have meat, you would shecht an animal. Now that animal could take years to grow. So to shecht an animal was not a joke. People would have meat, I don't know, twice a year or something. It was a very serious circumstance. So he would shecht an animal for Shavuos, because he would say, Ilav ha-yoyma kama Yosef ika b'shuka. If not for this day of Matan Torah, where I was able to get the Torah, where I was able to become a master or study Torah, Kama Yosef ika b'shuka. There are a lot of Joes in the marketplace. I would just be another Joe Schmo. But because of this day, it made me special. And the Rebbe says, okay, what about this day? Every day you're meant to study Torah. But he says, no, but what did the Torah accomplish? Before the Torah was given, there was also the Torah. We know that Avram learned in yeshiva when he was older. Yaakov learned in yeshiva. He learned in Shem Ve'ever. Particularly, it was probably here in Tzfat. And there was never a time that the rabbis didn't have a yeshiva, right? Yehuda Shalach Lefan of Goishna, he opened up a yeshiva. The Shevet Levi didn't go into slavery. They were learning Torah. In fact, the Rebbe Shab says that when Hashem gave the Torah, the people that were into pilpul, they were looking for a good pilpul. They couldn't believe it was 10 simple commandments. So the point is, what did the Torah accomplish? The Torah accomplished that the Torah and the world are not separate entities. They're the same thing. That you can bring God into this world. And it's a very difficult thing for us to understand, because by our understanding, that which is spiritual is not that which is physical. But the truth is, that which is physical can be just as much spiritual, can go either way. And it could become a spiritual entity. In fact, that's why the Rebbe says Mashiach is ready to come, because we've already gone all over the world, and we've already spiritualized the world. We've brought our values. We use the money and the location to build shuls, to do good things. And therefore, the world is ready for Mashiach. So in conclusion, it says that Polish Sfarim say that Nami Lechem is also the gematria of Ketz. So Shavuos is a very important time to daven for the Ketz, to daven for Mashiach. L'chaim v'levracha.